Thank you. Gentleman from Colorado is recognized for any questions he may have for the panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to Chairman Westerman and Ranking Member Grijalva for your testimony and for appearing before the committee today. I have great respect for Ranking Member Grijalva and for Chairman Westerman, both of whom I've partnered with, and having served as the Ranking Member and formerly the Chairman of the Subcommittee on Federal Lands in particular, have valued that partnership, and so I will preface my brief line of questioning with my thanks to both gentlemen for their work. Chairman Westerman, this is not your first time before the Rules Committee this year. You came earlier this year. Do you recall what subject you came to this committee on?
I believe I've been to the committee several times. I'm not sure which time you're talking about.
Well, so my understanding is you've been before the Rules Committee 3 times, but maybe I'm mistaken. This is the 3rd time. The first time you were before this committee was to push forward the CRA on the lesser prairie chicken, which I suspect you recall.
I agree with you on that.
All right, and then the second time that you and Ranking Member Grijalva graced us with your presence was on the long-eared bat. Do you remember that CRA as well?
I kind of thought those two were together, but I'll take your word for it.
Well, and
I think I've been here more times than that.
have you been? Maybe I'm wrong. At least, and if that's the case, my apologies.
Yeah, because we did HR 1, the lower
Your staff
energy,
may,
the lower
HR 1. That's right.
the lower
first-
energy cost act. We
That's
spent
right.
a lot
So
of time up here
four-
for that. Great bill, passed the
4
House.
times.
Going
HR
nowhere
1,
in the Senate.
long-eared bat, lesser prairie chicken, and now a bill that
Yeah,
would
I think there's
revoke.
actually more times than that as well.
All right. Well, the last 3 times, let's say.
But you want to
long-eared
pick the
bat.
two where we talked about the long-eared bat and the prairie
Long-eared
chicken.
bat,
That's
lesser prairie
fine.
chicken. I didn't think those would come up again, but here we are. And now a bill that revokes a lease between the National Park Service and the city of New York for Floyd Bennett Field. And I guess you could probably surmise from my line of questioning, I just don't know that the American people would expect the Congress to be spending such an abundant amount of time on bills that revoke leases between cities and federal properties, or bills to express disapproval about placing a particular animal on the endangered species list, when there are such pressing challenges facing the country in terms of costs and growing the middle class and work that I think we all believe needs to be done by the Congress. And so it's not meant in a pejorative way about your leadership, Mr. Chairman, because you're not, the bills that you and the ranking member bring forward to this committee are obviously, the prioritization is that's made by the leadership of the House and by the Speaker. But it is simply to say that I think the priorities that the current Republican leadership is pursuing, in my view, is misplaced and isn't reflective, I think, of the concerns that most Americans are feeling. We just came back from a Thanksgiving break. We're here in Washington. Most of us returned today. And I think most members would like to be spending their time debating issues around growing the middle class and making the lives of Americans easier, and not canceling leases between cities and federal departments. But you all have the majority, and so you choose to exercise your discretion in terms of deciding the prioritization.
And I would say I don't think the people who live around Floyd Bennett Field think this is something that we shouldn't be focusing on. I think when you look at the broader picture of federal lands and national parks across the country, that if America understood what was going on here, there would be more concern about it. I actually think, like I said earlier,
I'm not so sure that most folks in Arkansas or in Colorado are thinking about Floyd Bennett Field. I think
Well,
they're
but
figuring
I
out how to heat their homes and how to feed their children.
which is a crisis because, energy's so high, the cost of food's so high. They are thinking about a lot of other things. But this question has come up, I believe, in this committee before about, it's kind of phrased as, why are you focused on something so silly? And my response is because this administration did something that demands a response. Now, they were the ones that did the silly thing to start with by putting migrant shelters on National Park Service land in the middle of New York City. So are we just supposed to stand by and say, oh, go ahead, that's a crazy thing? I think as chairman of the committee and it's Congress's role to have oversight over the administration. This is an important issue that's definitely important to Representative Malliotakis, to other members in that immediate area. And I went there and talked to the citizens in that area, and it's an important issue to them as well.
I will leave it there. Ranking Member Grijalva, if you'd like.
Yeah, a little bit about the crocodile tears. The presence of these asylum seekers and those seeking refugee status in this country, it is an issue that is different because of the asylum law and international law. They present themselves, and the process then kicks in. And through the Trump administration and the inability to rebuild that as quickly as it's needed in terms of resources, the backlog, the elimination of staff that does that, the courtrooms, the judicial side, the processing side, the cash management side, that is credible fear is there, then status would be granted. If not, then that's another process, and they're not eligible. But we're not going through that process. We're waiting for that process to occur. The crocodile tears I speak about is the deal with public lands. Since I got to this Congress, I wanted to be on this committee. And because of the unifying factor that this committee has for the American people. Its parks, its lands. And to interject an issue as difficult, complex, and polarizing as the issue of immigration reform with no context and no solution other than to rail about it is wrong. And to interject it into this discussion on a jurisdiction that has been bipartisan and is a unifying factor in this country, I think is sad. The crocodile tears is my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who want to expedite as much drilling for as little price and the minimum amount of royalties on our public lands, irrespective. Isn't that a danger to the integrity and the sanctity of those public lands? Oh, frontline communities, environmental justice community. Those communities, it's a social issue. It's not really an environmental issue. That's what you hear. And yet, those can be collateral damage, and we only care about a neighborhood if that issue happens to coincide with the issue that we're trying to promote, i.e. the migrants, and i.e. this airfield. You know, I think these crocodile tears need to be examined, but we're not examining that. We're opening a discussion up on the issue of immigration that'll be with us too long in this Congress with no solution, because it is about polls, it's about the election in 2024, and how this issue can be the Republicans feel can be an important factor for them. Well, I don't think so, and this is why we're dragged into this discussion today, Mr. Neguse, on an issue that should be not separate, but that the Resources Committee shouldn't be the point of the spear on this ugly debate that's forthcoming and continues to be on the issue of immigration and migrants in this country. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say thank you to Ranking Member Grijalva for, I think, articulating that so well. And, you know, I would say, at the risk of quoting a fellow member, there's a gentleman from Texas, a member of this distinguished committee, dare I say a wise man, who went to the floor 2 weeks ago and asked the House to, quote, explain to me one material, meaningful, significant thing the Republican majority has done. I agree. And apparently, you know, the advocacy for Floyd Bennett Field could be added to the list, I guess, of the things that the Republican majority has spent their time on this last 10 months. I think there are other issues, pressing issues that we ought to be debating, including immigration policy. But I guess we'll have to leave that for another day on the Rules Committee. So with that, I'll yield to the gentlewoman from New Mexico for a moment.
Thank you very much. And I think that the ranking member's point about the need to look seriously at addressing immigration reform is really important. And that when we see bill after bill that doesn't look at the substance and doesn't look at that issue, we are reminded that there is a desire to use immigration and immigrants as political, political footballs and as cudgels, and as the ranking member mentioned, to sort of elicit divisiveness and oftentimes hatred, unfortunately, as we have seen people of my community gunned down because they are Latinos and immigrants. And Republicans have over and over again thwarted attempts to actually solve the issue. During President Bush's presidency, Republicans blocked their own president's immigration legislation. In 2013, House Republicans blocked the Senate's bipartisan immigration bill that would have done what you guys are saying you want, which would have attract workers from all over the world, devoted unprecedented resources for security along the border, as well as allowing the millions of undocumented workers to have a path, not a guaranteed, but a path to citizenship and to be able to work here. And we are dealing with a labor crisis right now, and addressing immigration in a clear-headed way would address that. Last Congress, Senate Republicans blocked bipartisan passage. We passed out of the House the Dream and Promise Act, the Farm Labor Workforce Modernization Act, and we couldn't get Republicans in the Senate to pass it. Those were bipartisan bills. All of these efforts have been bipartisan, but reasonable Republicans will join us in solving this crisis. But as long as they want to turn it into Biden's problem, it's not Biden's problem. It's a problem that is presenting itself at the border, and because Congress does not act, it's Congress's problem. Congress has failed us on this issue. Congress has failed, and we need Republicans to join with Democrats to solve this problem, not to just turn it into a cudgel. And thank you for the time, and I yield back my time to you.
I yield back to the chairman.
Thank you very much.